I see a hero. You just need to see it too. Please.
This isn't me. This isn't me!
Hey guys, and welcome back to another one of my Arrow Season 6 videos. So I sort of made it clear early on in the run of the season of Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, and Legends of Tomorrow that I'm only gonna be reviewing episodes when they have the kind of content that allows and warrants a review. And that's the case with this episode of Arrow, because for a few episodes now, there has not really been much that Arrow has been offering. But episode 12, in and out of itself, kind of offered a lot of insight into what Arrow is planning for the rest of the season. And together with episode 11, that being last week's episode, the two episodes kind of offered a couple of reveals that were much needed to explain a lot of stuff that's been going on and since the very beginning of the season. So let's get started talking about all of that and more on this video. Number one, let's start off by getting all that critique that I was talking about earlier out of the way. This season so far has not presented any compelling villains. Well, let's ignore episodes 11 and 12 because these villains just became more compelling than they've ever been since the start of the season. I think that during the span of the first 10 episodes of the season, the one time I did feel like Arrow has a solid villainous base was on the final scene of episode 9. And that was most probably because of that thing that I mentioned on my review of the mid-season finale, because it did feel on that final scene when they stood next to one another like this was the show's incarnation of the comic book Longbow Hunters. But besides that, I never felt that these villains were compelling. I never felt like these were real villains. For one thing, the character development for all of these villains and since the very beginning of the season has been extremely lackluster. As a matter of fact, except for episodes 11 and 12, there was almost no development for these characters whatsoever. So we are introduced to them, we keep watching them walk, talk, do all of the shit, but we're not really seeing anything defining of who they are. So we're not really relating to them either. But what is really saddening about the state of Arrow this season is while it is still better than the worst season of the show, that being season 4, they still have a worse villain than Damien Darhk. And what is even more saddening here is the fact that last season my favorite villain of the entire Arrowverse was actually Prometheus. So, over the course of the 2016-2017 Arrowverse TV seasons, it went like this when it came to villain ranking. Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow, The Flash, then Supergirl. But then this season, on the other hand, it is completely different. It is Supergirl, followed by Legends of Tomorrow, followed by Arrow, and then The Flash. And Legends of Tomorrow is yet to introduce its major villain. I mean, so far, we're just seeing his minions. We're seeing Damien Darhk and Nora Darhk. But yet, and in my personal opinion, Legends of Tomorrow is doing so far so good when it comes to the mystery surrounding Malice as opposed to the development of the Arrow villains. But that is pretty much my biggest critique and most important one of them all for the season of Arrow. And I know it just sounds like this one criticism, but it is very, very major. I mean, this series is about heroes and villains. It's not about Laurel, it's not about Felicity, it's not about who Oliver ends up with. It's about heroes and villains. And if we do miss one of the two, then we're missing one core pillar of what makes the series what it is. Number 2, speaking of Michael Emerson's role on season 6 of Arrow as Cayden James, that is extremely disappointing. I mean, once again, with the exception of episodes 11 and 12, it is extremely disappointing. You see, Michael Emerson is basically one of my favorite TV actors. I mean, Benjamin Linus on Lost and Harold Finch on Person of Interest. Can't say it enough, great actor, great performances all the way. But when you look at the series, the writing for the character is extremely sloppy. I mean, these showrunners, these producers, these writers, they kind of have a gem of an actor at hand, that being Michael Emerson. And so far, they have not tried to utilize his acting skills to like 50% of their potential, maybe not even 25%. But then again, this week we kinda got a reveal, or two actually, when it comes to Cayden James, that are gonna shape his character and for the rest of the season. So for starters, we got to know that whoever framed Oliver early on the season, whoever sent out that doctored photo of Oliver in the Green Arrow suit to all those news outlets, was not really Cayden James. Instead though, it was the very same person who doctored the video of Oliver putting an arrow in Cayden James' son, sent it to Cayden James, and ended up getting him all worked up against Oliver Queen. So what does this really mean for Cayden James, and how would it shape the future of his character on the season? So while Cayden James might have referred to himself on last night's episode as a criminal, being part of a criminal organization or a criminal villainous group and all, he's not really the kind of person who would generally think of himself as a criminal. So he's basically a hacktivist, someone who thinks he's out there to deliver the truth to people. He wouldn't have been in this situation in the first place, teaming up with these kind of people, unless there was something forcing him to. And this something is basically all about the idea that he believes that his son was killed at the hands of Oliver Queen. So what he's gonna do next, or what I kind of expect him to do next, is kind of switch sides. I'm thinking that he's basically gonna be turning against this cabal of villains that's out there to get Oliver Queen. Now speaking of that person who framed Oliver Queen for all of this, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's either Richard Dragon or it is Anatoly. But there is always the third option, which kind of makes it more of a brainer. What if there is one other person in all of this? One person that all of these people report to? If you remember on episode 9, or my review of episode 9 that is, and on that final scene, I did state something about all of them looking in front of them like they were looking at someone, like someone is actually watching them through a camera or something. So what if there was someone else beyond all of these people, someone they kind of report to, someone who got them all together based on their common hatred of Oliver Queen and their common objective of wanting to see him suffer? That is actually starting to sound to me like a possibility with the passing of each and every episode. But if not, my bet here on the orchestrator of all of this is on Richard Dragon. After all, and in the comics, he's the one who got all these Star City criminals under his wing and led them towards taking down the Green Arrow. Number 3, now I kinda liked how they explained on last week's episode how Vincent Sobel kinda fits in all of this. I like how he came to prove that he's not really part of this villainous cabal. I mean, it did not make a lot of sense from the very beginning. But nonetheless, his arc as a good guy did not really seem to last for long, and he ended up dead on this week's episode at the hands of Black Siren, which brings us to Black Siren herself in number 4. So Black Siren is clearly on the road to redemption. Now she's still resisting all of it, she's still trying not to be an equivalent to Laurel Lance from Earth 1, but then there was that entire scene with Quentin Lance, you know, her following him, her getting to that place where he lured her to, and her watching all these photos and footage of Laurel Lance. Now that scene, for starters, was very well acted, very well written, and very touching. And there was also the aspect of Thea and Quentin working together, which is something I kind of missed from season 5. But besides that, you can tell that something within Earth 2 Laurel is kinda shook up there. You can tell it when Cayden James gives her the order to kill Vincent Sobel. I mean, she does hesitate for a moment there, and even when she does it, even when she abides by Cayden James' orders, she stands there in front of the corpse and looks at it in a way that kind of insinuates that she might be regretting it all. But on the other hand, we've also got the Black Canary, we've got DInah Drake, she's kinda changing as well. So number 5, that entire conversation between DInah and Oliver at the very end of the episode, that was kind of a whole lot of crazy. DInah's attitude is clearly changing there. The only way to bring justice to this city is with a bullet. That is, and when you think about it, an extremely drastic change for the character of DInah Drake. She is about to tread a path that she might find out there is no coming back from, and especially that by the end of the episode, she's vowed to kill each and every one of them, and starting with Laurel Lance. And I'm expecting here that if Black Siren shows extreme willingness to be redeemed, and DInah still insists to go after her, then the team will have to stop her, by hook or by crook. But yeah, in all cases, that kind of change to DInah Drake's character is gonna be extremely interesting on episodes to come.
I'm going to make sure Vince didn't die for nothing. I'm going to kill every last one of them. Starting with Laurel.
But one other thing about DInah and Vincent Sobel is the entire flashback ordeal that we got to see on this episode. Is it too bad to say that I missed flashbacks, even though I know that these specific flashbacks kind of relate a story that we already knew from last season? The thing about flashbacks is, they've always been these fillers of the episode, and with them being fillers, present-day events have always been spread on lesser time during the episode. And when they did that on past seasons, the events of the episode themselves did not feel like they were dragging throughout the entire thing. They felt like they were pretty well spread over the course of an episode. Well, that is just my opinion anyway, it doesn't necessarily have to be shared by everyone, but I thought it was really good and really refreshing to see a flashback sequence on this episode. But number 6, so last week I did not do a review for episode 11 of Arrow, but I did do a string of tweets, a thread of tweets that is, that pretty much consolidated my opinion on the episode, and I did pose a few questions there, and one of those questions was, did the series just hint at the outsiders, or did they just flat out introduce the idea? So pretty much, when Team Black Canary, Wild Dog, and Mr. Terrific were trying to come up with a name on last week's episode for their new team-up, they came up with the Outsiders. I mean, they did not really decide on it, but it was kind of hinted at. Now that tweet of mine that I just mentioned continued to read, the Outsiders in the Green Arrow New 52 run is in a nutshell an organization aimed at fighting and eliminating corruption, and one that ends up corrupt itself. Could this possibly be a future hint? And given DInah's decision at the very end of episode 12 to kind of go dark, I'm thinking that it is a possibility that one or more of the members of Team DInah Drake are gonna end up going bad. Number 7. So just like I stated on my review of The Flash this week that I cannot really complain about the writing for Iris West, I cannot complain about the writing for Felicity either over the course of the past couple of episodes. I mean, last week alone, she had one of the best scenes we've seen her in such a long while. Now, all of that goes to prove that I was right about 2 points that I've been trying to make for a long while now. 1, I'm not really against the actress herself, I'm against how the role is written. For the longest while, the role of Felicity has been written in a very sloppy manner. The series tried to make the relationship the focus of everything, so they started building the relationship and built the entire series around it. But then there is 2, when they did the entire Felicity wedding on the crossover and then on episode 9, I did state that maybe, just maybe, it is a good thing. I mean, right now, they're not really focusing on the romance between Oliver and Felicity the way they used to. The annoying teenage kind of romance that they used to do with the two of them. So what they did now is have them become this married couple, so it's a different dynamic. There is still some romance, but nonetheless, it has been toned down like a whole lot of notches. I am as well most definitely liking the banter between Felicity and Curtis. I mean, it did provide Curtis with a whole lot of character development over the course of the season. But finally though, number 8. Here are 2 more flaws that I've been seeing so far with the writing for Arrow post its mid-season. So first off, whatever happened to that anti-vigilante act that has been passed, and whatever happened to Oliver being out on bail and kind of awaiting trial? That arc seems to have been completely wasted and lost in translation since the series came back for its winter premiere. But secondly, there is this one major plot hole with this episode. So on season 5, we had Lila refer to Cayden James as this man who's 20 times as dangerous as Snowden. Yet on this season and on this episode, we get to realize that this faked video flew right over his head. The fact that it was fake, that is. I mean, it does kind of make no sense whatsoever. But with these 2 most recent episodes being improvements in terms of quality over the episodes before them, I'm kind of glad I waited before I did a review of any episodes of Arrow. So let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode, let me know what you thought of this review, do you agree with me on the points that I've raised, or do you have a different opinion on these points? Let me know as well if you liked this video by dropping it a much appreciated like, and if you did like its content, it would be much appreciated as well if you subscribe and enable notifications for my future videos. Until I see you next time though, thank you all for tuning in and have a great day.